All right, this is the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and today we are discussing one of the titans of 90s cinema.
Perhaps the titan.
The titan, Kevin Costner, and two of his films that deal specifically and explicitly with the theme of our show, namely the apocalypse, the end of the world, and the risorgimento, if you will, that might or might not occur in the wake of such a cataclysm. By this, I of course mean infamous 1995 bomb Waterworld, and even bigger bomb and even worse film, possibly. We'll get to the bottom of this. 1997's The Postman, which is not only a Costner vehicle, he's the star, but it is his directorial follow-up to his acclaimed Academy Award-winning debut film, Dances with Wolves. What are your thoughts on Costner, Michael? Where do you stand on the man?
Costner's a kind of weird one because now that he's doing the Yellowstone stuff, I think I have a bigger place for Costner. I don't like the show, but it just feels like
he's back.
Home for him.
He's back.
It just feels like home. It's like it's like he was always meant to do that type of thing. And these movies were like we were just talking about this, but like we're really on the heels of a pretty crazy run.
Yeah. I mean, starting with 87's, I think, Bull Durham, right? He has also, even before Bull Durham, The Untouchables.
Yeah, take us from The Untouchables. What's his run like?
The Untouchables, No Way Out, which I haven't seen, then Bull Durham, then Field of Dreams, something called The Gun Runner, I'm not familiar with, Revenge, not familiar with, Dances with Wolves, one of the most lauded films of all time. Of course, completely irredeemably canceled now, and rightfully so. Then Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, an enormous blockbuster. One of my favorite
movies.
As a kid, I mean, could not get
Brian
enough.
Adams on the soundtrack.
And
Canadian, by the way.
Brian Adams, yes. I know a lot about Brian Adams, believe it or not. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Then, on the heels of that, JFK.
Oh, banger.
Great movie. Ridiculous movie. We're not going to get into it now. Maybe someday later. The Bodyguard follows that with Whitney Houston.
Ooh. I mean, he's just nailing it, man.
Yeah.
This is like a 7-year run with just top shelf.
From 87 to 92. So 5 years of just nonstop hits, basically. Very impressive. And then a couple other films I don't know, A Perfect World, and then Wyatt Earp is when the sort of cracks in the armor start to appear. That's 1994. It did not do as well as any of the previous blockbusters I've mentioned. Was derided at the time, I believe, because like a certain film we'll talk about in a minute, it was 3 hours long. And this actually plays into Waterworld. I don't know if you noticed, but Waterworld is a mere 135 minutes. It is not a full 3-hour extravaganza.
There is an extended version.
Oh, is there ever? Yes. That was aired on TBS in the late 90s, I think, or something like that, right? This is one of the things, we'll talk about it more when we get into the film, but he clashed with the director, who is Kevin Reynolds, who was also the director of Robin Hood. So they'd had a very profitable working relationship before. Mm-hmm. And then Costner brought him into Waterworld. He was Costner's buddy. And by the end of it, I think they were at real loggerheads. And Reynolds actually ended up leaving the production. And I think Costner effectively directed the last several weeks, at least, of Waterworld. One of the things
we don't know all the details, but just watching the movie, it looks like looks like an annoying work environment.
Oh my gosh! Waterworld. Can you imagine?
It must have been such a fucking train wreck.
All the water.
There's so much water on set. I think it's the first thing that comes to mind. But just you got to finnick around, moving around. Everything must have been so complicated. I mean, it cost what, $185 million at the time,
which is hefty. It was the most expensive.
Oh yeah, it's still one of the most expensive movies ever made
in terms of inflation, definitely. So let's talk about, before we get into the specifics of Waterworld, let's talk a little bit about why post-apocalypse. Why would Costner turn to this material in the mid 90s? Any historical events you think might have triggered this interest in this subject matter for him.
Well, I guess it does come on the heels of the end of the, what was it called? The Soviet Union?
Yeah,
Would that be,
the Cold War.
could that possibly, yeah, because that's what, we're talking about the early 90s, and then he gets his shit together to get these movies rolling in the mid 90s. So he's probably working on Waterworld pretty much right
93,
after that.
93,
Yeah.
94. Yeah.
When Yeltsin's like trying to hang on or whatever's going on
Well, the
over
U.S.
there.
is propping up Yeltsin. Yeah,
Exactly.
rigging elections for Yeltsin, etc. Yeah, I mean, I remember being very excited by this period of change. I was in, I think, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I was in either fourth or fifth grade. And I remember my teacher had a friend who was Russian, and he like came to our class, and me and another friend did an interview with him about like the future of American friendship with Russia and how we're going to do, it seemed like there was this real opening up of the gates, and like this capitalism has won. This is also the era of Fukuyama's famous End of History book,
Sure.
article, and then expanded into a book, which basically says, after the Cold War, we've got to accept that like liberal democracy with capitalism, that's it. That's like the final form of human government. And, much derided, sort of buying into using an old Hegelian term from the 19th century, applying it to this political reality that set in the 1990s. There's a lot about that book that it turns out is kind of right. I think we've seen that some of the things he predicted were mistaken, and he missed some things. I don't think he talks about the rise of religious extremism very much, for instance. But we've already, in the first couple episodes of our show, have talked about the fact that capitalism does have this vice-like grip over culture, where it feels like there really is no alternative. And I guess what Costner's maybe thinking with these movies is, all right, America has won, but what if, despite that, it collapsed? So it's sort of like dealing with the unthinkable. There's no enemy, so the enemy either has to be environmental, as it is in Waterworld, or from within, as it is in The Postman, right? So I think that's why I don't have any other really good answers for that.
I mean, honestly, when I think about Waterworld, if I had to guess, and I don't have any sense of what actually happened.
Sure.
I think somewhere in there, it's a man who is so sure of himself, ripping off hit after hit, who literally is just like, what if we made the whole movie? The whole movie's it's just water. Earth gone, water only. There's your movie. And somebody's like, it's Kevin Costner. Here's $200 million fucking dollars.
Yeah.
To me, it could just as easily have been like that type of experiment.
Or even like he just got really into sailing.
But it's the type of Waterworld is.
He's like, sailing is awesome. Let's base an entire film around my new
right. But let's come up with a whole new way to like run a boat that we can then throw out there in the first few minutes of the. But I think it strikes me as the type of pitch that just appeals to these maniacal studio types who are like,
big star.
Everything this guy does turns to gold. And you can see me like, it's just water, as far as the eye can see, water, right? And like, we gotta film out there. Think about that, man. We're out on the fucking water, we're filming. I think that like actually was probably a huge selling point, was just the simplicity of world ends, now there's just water, go. That's what it feels like to me. And when you look at the way the movie came out, that's what seems to be the reason that it got made, because there's nothing of substance to this thing. I don't think.
No, it's an amazingly empty film. Let's get into Waterworld. Why not?
Sure.
As I said, it's a tight 135 minutes. Watching it, I honestly felt like it was 7 hours long.
Did you watch The Postman first?
I did actually.
Okay, so I would recommend anybody who's gonna try the double feature, start with Postman,
and don't do them at the same day, because it's
crazy.
It's
what
mad.
Stu
that
is
way
describing. I did the opposite of what Stu's describing. I watched Waterworld, which felt interminable at 135 minutes, and then the next day I watched The Postman, and it was probably the roughest movie watching experience of my entire life.
Yeah, I don't know what we were thinking, but anyway, what we were thinking is this fits well with the theme of our podcast. I
Sure.
think that's the extent of it. What I love about both these movies is, and we'll keep talking about them in relation to each other because I think it's hard. They're a dyad.
Yes.
They pair well. In that they're both terrible. But coming on the heels of our discussion last week of Al Gore, I felt like Waterworld was a perfect sort of like, what if Al Gore's like polar caps melting nightmare scenario just played out? And
what if it didn't stop with just the 9/11 memorial?
yeah, what if in fact
it went even further?
The entire world were in fact to be flooded, and we see that in a very 90s CGI segment that explains what has happened by the. It's basically like the polar ice caps have melted. The world is covered in water. Absolutely no reference to any agency causing this. There's no explanation. Nope. There's nothing. The film is set in 2500, so 500 years or so from the present day of when the film was made. And that, I think, is very problematic for a variety of reasons that we'll get into shortly. Costner's character, unnamed. I think another thing that unites these two films, in neither film does he have a name. He's called the Mariner in this. That's what people, Mariner, help us get out of here. That's the only sobriquet that he's granted by his fellow characters. In The Postman, he's initially called Shakespeare, then he becomes the Postman, right? And we never even hear anything about what his actual name was, which rules. What do you think's going on with the no name? Do you think it's just like a Clint Eastwood thing, like The Man with No Name, the spaghetti Western kind of?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is sort of an attempt to add depth and mystery where there is precisely none.
Yeah.
Like they also call the mythical land where there is still like dry land.
They call it
dry land.
Yeah, that's right? Brilliant.
And this and the nameless thing, particularly with Waterworld. Waterworld just feels so haphazardly put together and rushed
and so literal. Everything is so literal, right? He's on the boat. Oh, he's the mariner.
He's the mariner.
Where are they going to? Dry land. It's the place where they have dry land, which, spoiler alert, turns out that is the top of Mount Everest.
Yeah, maybe it's just like to venture a possible reason. Like you have both of these worlds taking place, the story taking place in a post-apocalyptic reality or fantasy or whatever.
Right.
And, that we would also be nameless, that like all of these petty identities and markers of the self that once existed have given way to water in this case. Right?
Yeah.
Who could have a name at a time like this?
As well as Stevens would say, everything has been by water washed away.
But the other characters have names. It's just our hero is nameless, but in The Postman, a witness. And that's the thing. It's like they both also share these similarities. In terms of the characters, it's not really, they're very similar to do back to back as movies, I think, where, they are wanderers. They are outside of the system. They're not really involved in what's happened. They haven't been involved in making things worse or making things better. They've just been carried along by the weight and passage of time. And finally, what do you know? Around page 10, something happens.
That's right. Waterworld opens with him drinking his own urine, which is great, very contemporary.
But did you notice when they showed it? Did you see any real explanation for how the
filtration
transition?
system? He puts it in a little filter, and I guess we're to understand that takes out the.
It just looks like a Brita filter, but somehow it takes piss out and turns it into water.
Yeah, well, it's one of the miracles of Waterworld. What can we say? There's a steampunk vibe to this film, right? Where even though it's far in the future, I mean, the biggest problem I have with the film, we may as well just where does all this stuff come from, right? Yeah. Like, it's 500 years. We don't know how long Waterworld has been Waterworld, but based on the stuff that they find, it seems kind of stuff from our era.
So why don't you just explain the basic setup of the parties involved?
So there's Kevin Costner, the mariner. He is on a huge massive trimaran, three-hulled sailing vessel that has wild technology. It has a kind of rotor system that allows it to stay stable when he's diving. There's a has a variety of sails. It has harpoons. It's like the Batmobile. It has all of these special features. He meets various traders in the ocean who are other people on always much less impressive boats. And the places where business is transacted are these what they call atolls. They're not really atolls in the sense of it doesn't seem like there's really any land there, but it's like a anchored permanent.
Yeah, it's like an artificial
island,
man-made island, basically.
And it's like a ring. It's like an atoll in that maybe there's kind of some mud in the middle of it that maybe implies there was once some kind of land, but there's no dry land. Let's put it that way. And this is the place where business is transacted. And then the enemy is the smokers, they're called, which is hilarious. They all ride jet skis. What is fueling the jet skis?
And they're just pirates. They're just pirates.
They're pirates, and their leader.
So we retained English as the language for these 500 years. But for some reason, pirate became a name.
He also speaks another language at various moments, which he tells us is called Portu-Greek.
Oh, I love that. Yes, Portu-Greek is like what the other traders.
The Portuguese and the Greeks merged, and their languages coalesced into Portu-Greek. Which
it must be such a free exercise having written this movie.
Oh yeah, you don't have to explain anything.
Precisely because you're not explaining anything, you can just throw darts at the wall.
Yeah, Portu-Greek, why not?
Just be like,
sure.
Yeah. So are they called smokers because they have access to oil and gas,
or is it because they are always smoking cigarettes?
Like the guilty remnant in The Leftovers.
Yeah, which we'll get to soon, but slightly better. Work of art.
Slightly better. Yeah.
But no, literally, they're smokers. This is 90s smoking bad, sort of PSA. Mm-hmm. All the bad guys in this smoke constantly. So I was just kind of like, is it? And then they're called the smokers. And is it? Yeah, I think it's also mostly just because they have oil. But in watching this time, I was like,
it's that literal. It's like they smoke cigarettes.
Yeah. I was like, is it that literal? Like this movie is that dumb. So yes. There's a girl in one of the atolls who has a mysterious tattoo on her back that for some reason the smokers want. Why they want it, it's not explained. How they know about it, like there's
right. But very early in the movie, you do have someone explain to the viewer the is it real or is it a myth? But it is a map to the dry land.
Well, they think it's a map. They don't even know how to interpret it.
They think it might be a map, but they don't know.
Yep. Basically, they attack. Kevin Costner brings in a bunch of goods. He brings in the currency of this world is dirt, right? Because presumably you need it to grow plants.
Yeah,
and he gets
very hard to come by
because it's far down underwater. If you want to go. Costner, though, has no trouble doing it because, as we learn quickly, he's a mutant, right? Yeah. He's evolved such that he could breathe underwater. He has gills behind his ears, and believe it or not, this is not favored by. This is their first instinct on learning this about him is like kill him, right? I mean, there's intolerance towards mutants.
Right, a man who could travel underwater couldn't possibly be of use in Waterworld.
Yeah, better kill him. So they attack. They try to get the girl. Jean Triplehorn plays. The girl's name is Ilona. I forget what Jean Triplehorn's character's name is. I'm just going to call her Jean Triplehorn. She's great. I love her. There's nothing for her to do in this movie, really. But
no.
The girl is good too. I think she does a good job. They escape with Costner. Costner is literally like drowning in mud in a cage. They free him. He pulls off a miraculous escape on his, magical trimaran. And then the rest of the movie is essentially them fleeing from the smokers who are in pursuit of the smoke.
The entire movie becomes a pursuit where they also are eventually going to try to find the dry land. That's the whole movie.
The girl is the MacGuffin, right? She is the key to this. Like she's the one object that can open the door.
But I think one of the things that is interesting about Waterworld and to an extent The Postman right? So speaking of this sort of the American idea of the apocalypse and how
Hmm.
American values are what manage to hang on. That there's this like virtue in the wanderer, in the loner,
Yeah.
right? In the individual
Yep.
that remains despite all of the obvious changes that have brought people desperately together, whether in criminal organized crime gangs or in communities that are desperately trying to get a little bit of dirt. The only person that can really see, you know, the way forward and doesn't really even want to, right? He doesn't like Costner's
It's very hero's
in
journey, right? He
right in
refuses
both of these movies.
the
He's not
call.
trying. Yeah, he's not trying to save the world, and it's sort of where you're supposed to see his only virtue. I think is that being on the outside allows him the ability to like see things in a way that other people can't quite. And what's interesting about Waterworld is, and a little bit in The Postman, but is it for me through the whole movie, he's not really a good guy,
No, he's terrible. I mean,
which is a very interesting choice.
after their initial escape, he runs into another trader, and the trader is like jabbering to himself, seems very unstable and unwell. And without even really thinking about it, he's like, "You can have half an hour with Gene Triplehorn if you'll give me these pages of paper," which is another valued item.
Yeah.
And for some reason, so we're just like, oh, okay, so he's just a monster.
Just to have paper.
He's just a monster, right? Yeah. Like he doesn't care about these people at all.
He also like very aggressive with the kid.
Yeah. He's like, don't touch anything on my boat. He's
very shitty to both of them, even though I think they've saved his life.
Essentially. And he's like, well, I saved your life in return, so we're even. And now he's just like, I'm going to just kill the girl because we don't have enough water and maybe one of you can survive. And Gene Triplehorn sort of begs him not to, and he's like, okay. Then he changes his mind about sort of forcing her into this sexual relationship with this guy, right? And he comes back down and he kills the guy. And so then
he kills the guy, and he because he realizes like I might actually like her a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no real.
I might want to fuck her eventually. So he kills the guy. Is essentially like feels like his motivation there.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of the things that fails is that like, and it as the years go by, TV and film I think get better and more practiced at these like big time anti-hero projects, right?
Right. Making us like them. They're better at making us like them despite their evil.
Like your
flaws.
Breaking Bads,
Tony Soprano, etc. Yeah.
But Costner, it's like the character of Waterworld, the mariner, he's in between. Like he's not interesting enough as an anti-hero to like have that sentiment form when you're watching it, but he's just kind of a bad guy, but he's also like not really doing anything to help, right? Like one wonders if like when he starts to clue in or believe the girl, it doesn't even seem like he cares or recognizes the great potential for this.
Well, he doesn't. He clearly doesn't. Even at the end, when they've reached dry land, he just leaves immediately. He's like,
he just leaves.
He's like, I don't belong here. See you later. And it's like, okay, bye.
Yeah, it's. I mean, in both of these, we'll talk about the Postman ending in a bit more detail, but like, they're both just absolutely no payoff for an incredible amount of commitment,
of suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that like given Costner's run and the resources available, like he really had to go out of his way to fuck up Waterworld.
Well, I think it's clear that his ego is just so enormous that he is unable to take notes at this point, right?
Well, what's crazy about it is his ego is so enormous that Waterworld happened.
Yeah.
In 1995.
Yeah.
Happened.
And then The Postman happened 2 years later.
And then he goes on to do this. His next thing is, I mean, I think he filmed one movie in between, right?
Yeah.
But his next big venture immediately was The Postman.
Right. Well,
Like,
Tin Cup is the one movie between the two.
Right, but Tin Cup's I love Tin Cup.
It's actually
fun movie,
but
like
it's a good movie. It's back to the sports niche that he sort of had.
yeah, you can see him like, how the fuck are we gonna deal with this Waterworld disaster? Get me a fucking golf movie.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Right. He's like, I can't do another baseball movie. Golf. Perfect. Yeah.
right.
Let's talk about Dennis Hopper, who's the villain of this. I thought this was so funny because his performance is terrible. It's like the most phoned in thing imaginable.
I mean, you would be hard pressed to find a major actor male, like so transparently male in a performance.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because Dennis Hopper, of course, is in Apocalypse Now as the sort of crazed reporter guy who's fallen under the sway of Kurtz. Now he's the Marlon Brando, and this is his Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And
this is where you learn like he could never hold center in a movie like that.
No. Well, I mean, maybe he could if it were not like one of
I love Hopper, but he's a great peripheral energy guy. He's like a volume scorer off the bench. Dennis Hopper, you know?
Okay. I think he's good in some stuff. I mean, but yeah.
He is.
But I agree. Like, he's not Marlon Brando. He can't just show up and like mumble for 2 weeks and be the the centerpiece of like one of the best movies of all time.
Right. Like, I think the comparison.
Granted, Coppola, slightly bigger genius, perhaps.
Sure. Than Costner, but I think the comparison I'm actually making is like a role like the one he played just before Waterworld, which was Speed.
Yeah.
Right.
That's perfect.
Now he plays a bigger role in that movie than he does in Waterworld, but the type of character and the type of evil, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's this like. I don't think Hopper can do this like grandiose evil, this thing that's meant to have sort of like really be able to carry the weight of the movie, you know? And because Keanu Reeves is like obviously the dominant figure in Speed, Hopper just provides this great foil that is fun and like very, very much like engaging, right? Whereas this thing, they do the classic thing where they like fuck up his face to make him like really snap.
He loses his eye, and then there's like a slapstick scene where the replacement eye is like rolling around on the floor and stuff. It's like, and they're playing the Peter Gunn theme is playing for some reason in the middle of this movie.
Yeah,
like,
but his dialogue is so labored. It's like,
oh no, it's terrible.
His dialogue is like in a movie that's supposed to be like, the sun is beating down on Kevin Costner and he pisses in a filter so he can get one last drop of water. This Hopper character is like a parody of a villain.
Yeah.
In a movie like this.
He's completely camp, right? It's like so far over the top that you're just like, what is happening? I don't want to talk too much more about this because I just think it's terrible. I want to bring up a couple things about it that really bothered me. One, the Exxon Valdez, it turns out, is the base. Yeah. And again, that's just like plucking something from the recent history, right? Exxon Valdez is the famous oil tanker that crashed near Alaska in 1989, I believe. And, you know, huge environmental disaster, clearly ties into the idea that some kind of environmental catastrophe has caused Waterworld, though that is never explained at all.
Well, but they do, like in the story of the making of the movie, I did read that the director insisted on there being an environmental message before committing to it.
Well, mission accomplished.
And it was being debated, you know, what the cause of this should be, and you know, to go back to what
meteor or something, like
to go back to what you're saying about like why were these movies coming out at this time. You know, although obviously we talked about Gore coming to climate change in a public way like this in 2006 with Inconvenient Truth.
He was already he was involved in the early 90s.
In the 90s, you did have this burgeoning environmental consciousness, particularly among like Hollywood liberals, right? And like you would have Earth Day at school, right?
Well,
recycling
and like
programs.
The Montreal Accords, which ended the use of CFCs because of the hole in the ozone layer. Right. That was like
the ozone layer.
That was mid 80s. So that was
Save the rainforest was a big thing. Save the whales.
Yeah.
And so like it makes sense that this director would want to portray that, and it's interesting to see that when it sort of is spat out at the other end, it's not even still particularly clear that that man did something to cause this
That's
to the
right.
environment.
It's just gestured at, and there's no
Yep.
explanation. The end of the movie is on the Exxon Valdez, which for some reason is afloat and full of oil still. So this is 500 years later. Where's the oil coming from? I don't know. Where are the cigarettes coming from? I don't know. How do they have enough fuel to like have their army of jet skis? I don't know. Right? Like none of the material realities, like that are shown in this film make any sense at all.
None.
Like
How do they jet ski around?
well, they have the Exxon
But need-
Valdez,
but
which
need
is
dirt.
which is filled with like infinite oil, apparently.
This lasted for 520 years.
Yeah,
Or what happened.
yeah. Well, of course. I mean, that makes sense, right?
And just like they always have just enough.
Even though
to get
like
by.
the Exxon Valdez in our reality crashed and spilled its oil into the
Spilled
ocean.
its oil.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's just something about this that's like so discordant. The end of the movie, there's the other big thing that I've been dancing around is this is just Mad Max on the water, right? Like he's Mad Max.
It wanted to be.
I mean, if Mad Max were terrible, right? Like
Yeah.
it's much worse than the worst of the Mad Max movies, which Thunderdome probably is the worst. I don't know. We'll get into
the
Mad
same
Max.
like dust. Everyone's in dusty attire.
They have
you
that.
know?
Yeah, there's like a slight S&M bondage gear kind of subtext to
Yeah.
what they're wearing with the smokers, especially, right? One of the smokers is Jack Black, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did not notice that.
The pilot smoker. They have planes also.
What?
Yeah, it's young Jack Black. This movie is terrible. But
Yep.
that said, I would argue that it is slightly better than our next film, which is
Ugh.
The Postman. All right, so The Postman. Where to begin? An American nightmare, right? Like a couple things.
Truly.
A couple things to start. This movie is Waterworld is terrible. This is like even worse than Waterworld, but it's better than Waterworld in that it's more ridiculous somehow. Like it's just so maudlin, so extended, so empty. It's amazing. This movie is set.
Yeah, you like. I find myself watching it like slack-jawed. That like it could be both this slow and pointless, and like, I treated it more as a comedy by the end of it.
Oh,
you know,
you have to. That's the only way in with this. I watched this for the first time when I was in college. It was on HBO or something at home. I was home for the summer. Just one afternoon, this was on. I didn't see the beginning, but I like watched the last 2 hours of it, say. And all I remember is my favorite part of the movie, which is that for some reason Tom Petty is in it as himself.
oh, it's magic.
Like
It turns out that Petty, when in 1982, so long time before,
15
had
years
made
earlier.
had made a music video that was the song was about the post-apocalyptic reality or environment, a scenario, and he just decided that one day he wanted to be in a movie that was like in a post-apocalyptic world, and they gave it to him.
Yep.
Like that's why he's in the movie. He just always wanted to do this.
You know, I'm in my imagination, he's in much more of the movie. And the whole time watching this time, I was like, "Where's Petty? I just need Petty. Petty's gonna get me through this." He appears in like the last 20 minutes of the film for like 5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
It's torture. If Waterworld, I feel like Waterworld was more like it has more of like a Robin Hood vibe, even though it's obviously Mad Max and all the other things we said. This is Costner trying to tap back into his Dances with Wolves, like Western.
Oh yeah.
Western energy, right? Americana.
This is full Oscar bait, which makes it even more incredible because it is so laughably bad. Like, you know, an Oscar bait movie that like is obviously drawing on themes or characters or ideas that they know will gain sympathy with that particular
What do
audience.
you mean, Michael? That has never happened. Yes, I
But
do.
like usually you are annoyed by the fact that like the story is clean and the acting is solid and it's all tied up in a bow and it's just presented to get somebody a statue.
Yeah,
This thing falls so short
yeah.
in terms of quality for even that adventure that watching it is, considering where he is in his career, watching it was just stupendous because again, like we talked about his ego, he had come off of the first real disaster of his career with
And like
Waterworld.
Waterworld eventually did break even and make money. Like it
Well,
didn't
interesting
do.
in the foreign film market,
It did
in
very
the
well,
foreign
and
box
then
office.
in DVD and VHS sales in the late '90s was very successful. Rental market, like
Now,
it.
do you think that in the late 90s it had it gotten this kind of like kitsch cult, it did so badly, I'm gonna buy the DVD?
Waterworld, yes,
Yeah.
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 Like
That's what it feels
it
like.
was like a so bad. It's like we've got to see what this is all about. Even if you just rented
Right.
it, maybe you didn't buy it, but it performed well in rental markets. It made
It's like
money.
$185 million Emily in Paris, you know?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Um, like in Waterworld, we have very little explanation of why the world is like this. And Waterworld set 500 years in the future, so okay, whatever. This is set in literally 2013.
It is set in 2013.
It's set 16 years in the future. And we're to believe that in 16 years, the entire US government has collapsed utterly. People have literally forgotten how to read. No one can like it doesn't make any sense. You're just like, "Wait, what?"
No one really remembers what the before times were like, particularly.
Well,
Like
we have a guy
know
who
the
was
government.
yeah, there was a guy who was in the Vietnam War. So that tells us, okay, so this reality was like our reality at least until the mid 70s. Like, is that when everything started falling apart?
I mean, that's the thing about the year choice is that typically when these movies are made, like they accept the world that exists when they put the movie out is the normal
the
world.
starting point, and that the
Is
movie
the starting point.
diverges from
It
that year.
seems
Yeah, yeah.
inconceivable. It's almost like if you talked to the writer of this movie, he was imagining also things falling apart after Vietnam or something.
Or
Like
after World War II. I mean, like, what would have had to have happened in order to create this dystopian landscape?
I mean, the first scene, the opening sequence, he's walking across a brand new desert,
Yeah.
as far as the eye can see.
And
you know?
there's a Citgo station or something, right? Like a gas station that is like utterly abandoned and desolate, and that no one has been there. He's actually hallucinating, right? He has a little hallucination where he looks in the mirror and he sees like a family filling up their car with gas, and then it's like, oh, what? And
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think now the way that these movies have come out and shows now,
yeah,
a lot of them are based on things, and I think it's fair. Things can happen very quickly because we can imagine from the wellspring of technology that we have now,
right.
we can just make a jump where someone makes a huge breakthrough based on the type of technology and computing we know exists. And so you can see these like Black Mirror type, the Ethan Hawke movie, whatever. You can have these like near future things where, catastrophes happen.
Station
This
11.
Right, like I can't conceive of how this could have happened in 1997.
The other thing is, like, with Station 11, which I think we'll talk about eventually on the show,
Mm-hmm.
there's a pandemic, and we're shown, okay, the pandemic came and it killed like 95% of people. And it was like COVID times, 950 or whatever, right? And everyone is dead. So you're like, oh, okay, so that's why the world is like it later, right? In this film, we get none of that. There's like allusions to stuff happening, but there's no coherent picture of like what was the chain of events that led to this uprising, that led to the global catastrophe. There are people who are like, there was the 3 years of winter,
Right, and they also said like the river, the oceans, the water stops raining. There's
and
a
like
huge drought.
fish are dead, and like there's.
But all of the only reason given is the Great War.
Well,
So somehow like the war brings about these plagues.
Well, I think it's also
Right.
there's a great war, but there's also environmental catastrophe, right? It's like it's a combination of factors. But again, we are not it is not explained to us, right? We are not
Right.
given any insight into how this world came to be. In 16 years, right? Because Kevin Costner makes his money, such as it is, by going around, again, no name. He has no name. He he performs Shakespeare very badly, right? He kind of gets up with a couple of props. He has a donkey. They act out scenes from Macbeth.
He's a one-man theater troupe, traveling theater troupe, whose other actor is a donkey.
Yeah,
actually,
which is awesome. I mean, it's the only part of the movie I liked, aside from the Tom Petty thing. But anyway,
I mean, my favorite part of that is him acting Shakespeare. So he's doing Macbeth,
and he's an actor.
And he's Kevin Costner.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But he's not good at it.
No.
But then they get away with that by making it so that he's not supposed to be good at it.
Right. It's very meta.
But even though after all this time, thankfully, Shakespeare lives on, right?
But only because Kevin Costner, who's like 45, I think. Not a good actor. He's just chosen to act. No, he's 35. I think. Don't we see that he's he's 40, right? Because he's born in 73. I think we learn later.
Yeah, 1973.
So he's 40. All right, probably about the real age of Kevin Costner in 97. Mm-hmm. He knows Shakespeare. He's 40. His enemy, who we meet very soon thereafter, General Bethlehem, brilliant. He knows a little bit of Shakespeare too. So there's a couple of learned people. The rest of people, and
there's two.
The old woman who plays the piano for him in his theater production, she knows knows the lines too. But she's old. She's much older.
She's so old.
Yeah. So what we're to understand is that like anyone under like 35 is just illiterate, knows nothing, had no schooling, and they behave like it. This movie, the people in this film are like the dumbest people I've ever seen in a movie. They just stand like slack-jawed when Kevin Costner appears, and they're like, wow, he's so smart. Oh my God. Right. There's many times where characters are like, he's so smart. And basically he's a con man. In the last film, he's a terrible person. In Waterworld, he's literally thinking of like prostituting Jean Triplehorn within like a day of meeting her. In this film, he's not quite that bad, but he's a con man. He's a liar. In fact, the whole movie, all of his accomplishments in the film stem directly from his massive lying, right? Yeah. And then his
it's all self-serving, right? So he becomes the postman
because
in order to.
Well, let's before we get to that, he gets drafted into this militia of General Bethlehem,
right?
The wholeness, and there's someone called Nathan Holm, which is like Nathan Hale, the like American patriot who like was like the spy that got caught and like was the first person to die for the revolutionary cause. And
I just thought they named him Holmes so that they could name the militia Wholeness, which is close to holiness. That's what I figured was going on.
No, I think there's like a Nathan Hale Holm. Holm is such a weird word though. Wholeness,
very weird.
Doesn't really roll off the tongue. He's the guy that inspired. He's the Ammon Bundy type figure who's like a separatist, don't tread on me, libertarian, but also just a tyrant. And he's gone, he's dead, but his deputy, General Bethlehem, is in charge. And General Bethlehem has this militia, which they all have these like red bandanas, this like outfit, and they get themselves branded with this sign of 8, the mark of 8, because their whole society is based on these 8 laws, which I love. I mean, these 8 laws are so good. The 8 laws are
let's hear the 8 laws. You
will obey orders without question.
Great law.
Yeah, like does that remind us of any historical?
Wait, I'm sorry. Did he question that in his head? We don't know, but it is a law, so he's not allowed to.
Punishment will be swift. Oh, he was questioning it. Bang, he's gone. Mercy is for the weak.
Great law.
How's that a law? Like
it's the first one that can't be a law in any way.
Terror will defeat reason. Like
my favorite.
That like we were talking before. Like that's not a law. That's like an adage. That's like a maxim.
That's right. It's like someone being like look over
Machiavelli,
there. Reason. Right? Yeah.
Like
go terror it.
Oh wait, excuse me, sir. Reason is defeating terror over on the right. Like get the gun. Like. All right. Your allegiance is to the clan. Okay. Justice can be dictated. Again, not a law.
No,
Like what does that even mean? Like, of course we know justice.
I think it means that he can just say whatever he wants,
Yeah.
dictated. That's the way that I figured.
Fair enough. Any Klansman may challenge for leadership of the Klan. Oh, okay. Well, that's a little. I wonder if that,
I mean, that sounds really precarious.
I wonder if that'll ever come into play, like later.
I wonder. It's hard to say. It's just sort of planted there, number 7, when you're so bored from hearing them list every single one. What with this character Bethlehem, which is very similar to the Hopper thing in terms of.
I would say the performance is a little bit better than Hopper. I think.
I just think that it's so laughable.
It's very poorly written. Right?
The character is created so plainly to try in this desperate attempt to make this an epic movie.
Yeah.
That's the way anyway, so the 8th law is there's only one penalty, death.
Awesome.
Right?
Draco's back. Yeah, that's actually a lot.
And then of course you immediately find out that he punished someone and didn't kill them.
Right. The last guy who challenged for the leadership, he defeated him, but he didn't kill him, which is the only punishment. No. He instead castrated him and took out his tongue. Great.
Yeah, he's like a Theon Greyjoy figure.
Yeah,
a reek,
a
bit of a reek.
Yeah. We get to see a young Giovanni Ribisi is one of the other men who's drafted with Costner, and they're kept in this like net prison, and the only thing they want to watch is The Sound of Music. Right, The Sound of Music is like this film they project every night, and whenever the like jailer tries to project anything else, they riot. And then it's like
I love that, but it's like a war movie that he's trying to show.
Yeah, which you think they'd
be so into. Funny if he was trying to show like art house films.
It's like
he's like they've got like the one film nerd,
like Breathless, like Godard.
Yeah, and he's like, oh fine, you fucking Philistines, and throws on Sound of Music again.
Yeah, that would be funny, but no. Costner gets to be known as Shakespeare in this context, and the Bethlehem tries to recruit him as sort of his right-hand man because he knows he's smart also, but Costner doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Eventually, Ribisi rats on Costner for talking about possibly escaping. So Costner is forced to like go into this lion's den to like try and retrieve another Holness who was like killed by the lion. And in a classic Indiana Jones like moment, he like leaps off a bridge and escapes down the river. And we're like, oh, we'll never see the Holness again, right? Like, in his escape, he eventually finds an abandoned postal truck. This is the central hinge point, the turning point, the fulcrum around which this beautiful film pivots.
The fulcrum around which the next 2 hours and 10 minutes unfolds.
He's with the Holness for so long, and you're like, well, okay. And then the rest of the movie is so much longer. It's just like he puts on the mailman's outfit, and he takes his mailbag, has a bunch of letters, finds a settlement. They're wary of letting people in because of the Holness and other gangs that are out there, presumably. But we never see any other gangs. It's just the Holness, the only enemy in this film. Like, it's almost as if you got rid of them, like it would be paradise, right?
Right.
He informs everyone that there's a new president. He's in Minneapolis. His name is Richard Starkey.
Love it.
AKA Ringo Starr. And like no one remembers the Beatles, of course, because
no, it's 2013.
I mean, the Beatles were forgotten by then, right?
Yeah.
They're not. They didn't just announce they're making 4 biopics of the Beatles to come out.
Although I guess the.
Oh wait, no. They did announce that.
So it's a joke. Is it a Ringo joke that no one remembers Richard Starkey?
I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what it is. It's so dumb.
It just seems so just make up a name, and then they choose Ringo Starr's name. Maybe because no one. It's like
people know him as Ringo.
Is that, Ringo Starr.
But he's still one of the most famous people to ever live.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. But again, this is 2013, and Ringo Starr was done producing music by.
Well, presumably he was killed in the like uprising of like Birmingham, Liverpool, like riot of 1998 or whatever.
One would also assume then that Costner like is the Costner's character is familiar with the death of Ringo Starr in The Uprising.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
knows for sure that Richard Starkey does not walk the planet anymore.
so he kind of bluffs his way into this settlement, and he meets a young African American kid who tells him his name is Ford Lincoln Mercury, because he has adopted his real he's like discarded his birth name and taken on this identity because he dreams of one day driving a car, and there's like an abandoned Ford Lincoln Mercury dealership in their town. I don't know. I just don't even know what to do with this. I mean, again, it's just like this movie fetishizes capitalism, but also American institutions. Like the idea here at the center of this film is that, like, if we can get the post office going again, like that'll create like a cascading effect, and everything will be on its way to being back to how it used to be.
Well, and it also is like centered around the idea that the only good way to live is with American values and an American government.
Yeah.
It's the only conceivable thing.
Only possibility. That's right.
Right. And so like all of these risks that somehow start getting taken based on a con in the first place that wasn't even meant to be a long lasting. Once Costner's character starts to realize people just love to get a letter. They love it. I mean, people are going crazy. Like it's almost as though their lives are actually not that bad in every other way, because it seems like all that's missing in the way that it's filmed often is just getting mail.
Yeah.
Like it's not even that like then all of the power struggle begins. It's that people are so obsessed with getting mail.
Yeah.
They start writing mail to other people. And like, I get it in terms of like, I guess for some reason, very quickly, towns very like short distances apart, somehow they could no longer communicate at all. Right. This is also not really explained. Like they'll give a letter to a friend. Like it's like that person can't get on a horse.
I think we're to understand that there's like no one traveling between these towns.
Just no one can leave. Right. And so the postman ends up
because of the wholeness, I guess. Like it's not,
or the plagues.
Well, right.
Maybe?
They mentioned there were plagues. There was environmental catastrophe. There was war. None of this is explained at all. Right. We just get the sense that the Earth has been radically depopulated, but also there are fewer animals. Like you'd think there's.
But also with a lot of these movies, right? Like it's precisely what I'm saying is that like the idea that it came to this con man in 2013, sometime after all of this had been set up. So it's not like. This didn't all start in 2012. I mean, there's a fucking militia that is well trained, well set up.
Well, they destroyed the White House. We later learned. Right.
There's a whole process.
I was at the Battle of Georgetown. General Bethlehem says.
And like now, people are just being reminded about how great it feels to contact people.
Yeah.
Like no one tried to do this before. There was no attempt to like rebuild any infrastructure like this until one guy found a random postal bag.
Yeah, it defies logic.
It's wild. It's not even like it's a stretch that like would be justified if there was something compelling going on. But that's the problem. You end up just getting lost in the absurdity of the world build because there's not a single interesting character or moment in 3 hours.
Right, and the only good character is Michael, who's this guy who is sadly
he's great.
He's sterile because of the childhood mumps. Vaccines are gone, so some people will be happy
or
about that.
He just didn't take one.
Yeah, his parents were anti-vax. Yeah, his wife approaches Kevin Costner, the postman, and is like, "Will you be my child's body father?" Which we're to understand is like some new term because it's not a phrase I'm familiar with. Body father?
No, I think there's a lot of men who are sterile, and so it's like.
Well, interestingly, and one thing we didn't mention in Waterworld. This happens in Waterworld as well. When he's at the atoll, a woman approaches and is like, "Will you impregnate me?" Like.
Right, but hers is incest based.
Right, because they need genetic variation because.
That's right.
Even though if you look at the people living in the atoll, they're from like. Seven different races. It's like very
genetic
diverse.
Variations. I mean, this guy's got gills. Shouldn't he have been fucking everyone? He should have been a stud. He should have been like churning out a whole new species.
No, I agree.
Missed opportunity for the Mariner.
Waterworld is very diverse. I mean, relatively speaking, for the era, right? We see black people, we see Asian people, we see people from different. Postman is so white, right?
Yeah.
There's like 2 black people in the whole movie, and one of them is Ford Lincoln Mercury, who becomes his like disciple, right? Of course, immediately after Costner arrives, the wholeness come, because of course he escapes with Michael this is after, of course, he does sleep with Abby to be the body father,
just to give a kid.
And Michael, the sterile father, is so happy. They're like,
but the way that they like do it, where they make sure that she's definitely getting pregnant, is they have sex a bunch of times. They cut back to sex.
Well, because that's how that works, right?
As long as you have sex like 4 or 5 times in one night, you'll have a kid. As long as it's all happening in one night.
Definitely. Bethlehem comes. He's irate that someone has raised the flag over the post office.
The American flag.
Costner sneaks off. He has Michael take the flag down and burn it. Then he's like, "Oh, that woman is a fine piece of ass," I believe he says.
Grade A piece of ass. Grade A piece of ass.
Excuse me. I'm thinking of Heat, the Al Pacino.
Grade A piece of ass, which sounds very
great
in the mid-90s. It sounds like this guy's still stuck in 1997.
Right. Well, he was a copier repairman, right? Or copier salesman before he became a dictator general. Anyway, I think that's to emphasize how unoriginal he is or something. I don't know. Michael gets killed, of course. He tries to stand up. He's like, "That's my wife. You can't just take her." And so he's murdered. And then the general takes Abby, and Kevin Costner goes to another town, convinces them the government's back again. He's like giving them mail. He's actually doing the con, right? Because he invented this like I'm a postman thing just to get access to this one town. But now, because it moved everyone so much, he's actually like taking their letters to the next town. The Wholeness show up, and the people are like, "The U.S. government is back. You can't boss us around anymore." And the Wholeness have artillery, right? They just pull out like a cannon, start like bombarding this tiny town.
Yes, we can. Right.
Costner goes out and is like, "I'm the postman," and like it doesn't feel like that much time has passed since he escaped from the Wholeness, but the General Bethlehem has absolutely no memory of him. Very weird, right? He's like, "Oh, you're the postman, huh? Well, we're gonna kill you." But then he's saved by Abby. He rescues her, but he gets shot. They go off to the woods. She nurses him back to health, but they have a rocky relationship because she's in mourning. Her husband was killed. We learn that General Bethlehem, Costner's like, "Well, how do you know that the baby is not General Bethlehem's? How do you know the baby's mine?" And she's like, "General Bethlehem could never perform. He'd just get angry and like beat me." It's like, okay,
so many impotent men.
Yeah, got it.
One American hero who can fuck her 4 times in a night.
But everyone else is just utterly powerless.
Just can't do it.
So they spend months away, and when they go back to Pineview, the town where Ford Lincoln Mercury et al. Live, Ford has reestablished the postal service, and there's like a whole gaggle of like postmen going,
people are desperate to sign up. Everyone wants to be a postman.
Yeah. And
everybody.
Ford Lincoln Mercury has been like faking letters from Kevin Costner being like, "I'm here with President Starkey back in Minnesota, like blah, blah, blah." Anyway, it's
the one thing that's kind of interesting maybe is that like the whole thing is based on a con, and then the whole thing gets perpetuated by more and more lying.
Exaggerating. And until it becomes real. It's like the ultimate fake it till you make it, like kind of. Man, this movie is so freaking long, right? Eventually, like the kindly sheriff who at like first thought Costner was like a con man, he's like, "You know what? I'm starting to believe you." Also, Costner's catchphrase is like, "Things are getting better." Right?
Stuff's getting better. And like the kindly the sheriff who was skeptical has been won over, but then sadly he's martyred by the Wholeness because this post office is just unacceptable to the Wholeness. Yeah, and you can't have a post office.
General Bethlehem's just literally like lining up people and shooting them. Like, and just before the sheriff dies, who's George's boss from the last season of
Kruger
of Seinfeld.
He's so good.
He's like, "Ride, postman, ride," and then he gets
ride,
and he gets shot, and it's just like, oh my god, really?
But the stuff's getting better is a great moment because
stuff's getting better.
The slogan is he lies to everybody. Right, he lies to everybody.
Yeah,
and he says that this is the president's slogan that he delivers from the White House.
That's right. This is, and it's like getting better all the time. Beatles, right? It's clearly like that's right. But it's very funny to think that like this catastrophe could happen, and the president they're still churning out these totally asinine political slogans to like rally. Middle America, the people in this world are so dumb that like you really don't need to put much effort into it. At this point in the movie, I'm just like, when is Tom Petty coming to the movie? Like, what? Please.
Yeah, it was the only reason to watch it. You really were like, where is this guy?
Yeah. We see a bunch of endless montages of Costner delivering letters, other mail carriers, some of them getting killed by Holness. There's this incredibly maudlin, despicable, slow-mo thing of Costner grabbing a letter from the boy's hand and like, put a pin in that. It might come back at the end. Eventually, like, there's some like too many people are dying. Costner's like, I'm disbanding the post office. Like, he doesn't quite.
It's not worth it.
He doesn't
We should give up.
Reveal that it's all a lie, but that's sort of like It's sort of on the table. Like,
but his plan is to just give up
and like send a letter to Bethlehem being like, I give up.
Despite all of the things that he's seeing happening.
Right, spontaneously. They're like postmen from California who've like sprung up, and like
it doesn't move him. In fact, the only thing that moves him, I guess, is he has personal guilt about a chain of events that has led to some political violence.
Yeah, exactly.
And he can't handle that, so to like break out of that, he's like, fuck everybody's like clear desire and the hope that they finally have had for the first time in a lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm taking that away because I feel bad that all these people are getting killed, who, by the way, are all getting killed anyways. I mean, a guy's getting killed after he burns an American flag in service of somebody because he dares to say, please don't fuck my wife. But in Costner's mind, the only thing that stands in the way of like these people living or dying is him and his fake postal service.
It's amazing.
It's just, the movie is just careening out of control at this point. And just like trying to finish itself because like they couldn't even manage to like wrap this up in 3 hours. They're still scrambling. It's wild.
Yeah. And the final sequence, like he flees with Abby and a couple other people tag along, but Ford Lincoln Mercury goes to like deliver his letter to the Holness, and Ford is of course in prison just so they can have some leverage because he doesn't accept the postman's abdication. He needs to kill the postman. So he gets his army. Like the postman reaches this place, Bridge City, which is where we finally meet Tom Petty. Tom Petty is the mayor of Bridge City. And Kevin Costner's like, I know you. You're famous. And he's like, yeah, I used to be, man. And then he's like, wait, you're the postman? You're famous. Which is like...
It's so beautiful.
Like what is happening? Like... And then
I mean, think about that. Think about that. Petty's wanted this for like 15 years.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And then this is what he gets handed. Oh, what a travesty. Travesty.
It's amazing. And then he gets on this, he's going to go gather an army to like fight back against Bethlehem on the other side of this bridge. And he rides on this like zip line, essentially. Like he's in a little bucket, but it's attached to a zip line. And as he's like zipping across this like gulf, he's like reciting the "We Band of Brothers" speech from Henry V. And we're to understand, he's like gone from town to town. He's like gathered a massive army. And then the final,
and now he's good at reciting it. He's a great actor all of a sudden. He's a thespian.
Yeah. Well, he's a king. You know, he's got to rally the troops for Agincourt, right? And he comes with his Union army, and it's very obvious that the Holness are like the South. We've also seen throughout the movie the Holness hate black people. They're racist. Costner comes with his army. They're on horseback. And you're like, okay, cool. We're going to have like a cool, like big Civil War style battle sequence. No, we're not actually, because he invokes Rule 7 and challenges Bethlehem to a battle for leadership.
Which is like, again,
It's like, why didn't you do this? Like,
why did you not do this before? Like you had become a cult folk hero,
yeah,
sweeping the entire region, right? Every exchange with Bethlehem, you're coming out on top. Bethlehem is clearly losing, popular will, all that stuff. Everyone's turning against the postmen are rising up. All this stuff is happening. You're so guilty
that you just
about
you
postmen
give up,
getting killed.
You give up and
that
run
you
away.
Give up. You give up and run away. You end the postal service that apparently is going to save humanity.
But sometimes then, like a work of art,
then you get
the postal
an army.
Service is bigger than its creator, right?
Yes, of course, right. And then all he has to do is, and this is my favorite part of the whole movie, is that once he invokes Rule 7, that any Klansman can challenge the leader of the Klan,
and he tears off his shirt to reveal the 8 tattoo.
To reveal that he was at the beginning of the movie burned. He was branded with the number 8, so he's a member of the Klan as well. He's playing both sides, perfect. And after all of that, it's just like a backyard brawl.
Yeah.
It's not even like there's no way that Costner could have lost to this guy. This guy is frail. He's balding. He's got nothing on Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner could have killed him 1,000 times over.
They ride at each other on horseback and then jump off their horses.
And they jump off,
grab each other in midair, and just start wrestling on the ground.
They start wrestling. It's all he had to do. And
he wins.
Of course he wins. Yeah, he wins.
And then Ford Lincoln Mercury is going to come and just kill, because he's been freed, right? He comes over and he's going to kill him, and he says, "No, Ford, we're like..."
You know why? Because that's not America.
Yeah.
And now that America is back, we stop all the random killing.
Yeah.
Right? And never mind the fact that this is like specific killing. This is putting down of like a legitimate, like a politically violent threat, tyrant who should die and has shown no remorse.
But luckily, as he's been spared, he like grabs a knife or something, and he gets shot by his castrated eunuch, his eunuch helper, who's now Kevin Costner.
Who himself now is in a free America, and ready to find himself
do
again.
his part. And then we just cut. He meets back up with Abby. Abby's had her baby. 30-year time jump, right?
Oh yeah, here we go.
And that this is like the worst ending of all time, maybe.
It really is up there. I mean,
Costner is dead. The daughter, however, is unveiling a statue of him, which is a bronze statue. We see sailboats. We see technology is back.
Everything is back.
There are people filming.
Everything is restored
to
a perfect point of the normalcy. In fact,
it looks
so
like
funny about
1997.
It looks like 1997. Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, how could you have thought to make this the end of your movie?
It's amazing.
It looks like 1997.
And the statue is of like a frame from the movie that we're watching, which no one was around to witness, right? Like,
yes. Right.
It's like, well,
it's him picking up the letter from a child waiting on the road, desperate.
And the child is there for the statue unveiling. He looks at it. He says,
somehow
he's like,
the child is there.
He's like, that was me. And he seems
right there.
He seems surprised. So it's
right. So he didn't go to them with this information to help build the statue. They just somehow, by the grace of God, shot for shot.
Or maybe Costner on his deathbed was like, there was a time when I,
right.
Like,
and then like they brought in a composite artist to make the child look exactly like he did.
Like a police identikit, right? Like, he's like, the eyes are a little different.
It really does. That's the funniest part to me. I mean, obviously the statue's so amazing.
Yeah.
Because we're led to believe that they just created this out of thin air. But yeah, it doesn't go back to 2013 even.
No.
It goes back to the time the movie came out. And it looks like the beginning of like Reese Witherspoon coming of age movie. Or
it's like Napa Valley or like somewhere on the California coast or something.
Yeah. Where like Freddie Prinze Jr. is going to come out with Jennifer Love Hewitt, or there's going to be some sort of like killer in this small town.
Did you hear? Like, that guy we hit with the car last summer isn't really dead.
Right. And it starts with the burial of this really important figure in the town.
Yeah, no.
It looks and there's all these rich people who sail, and later we'll see a scene with the killer with his hook, out there on the ocean,
on the yacht or whatever.
Yeah. And he just went right back to that exact aesthetic. But yeah, I was so thrilled when it was over. When I was watching I like exhaled like genuine relief when I realized that the time cut was coming and that we were actually done.
Yeah, I mean, these movies are both just so empty. It's amazing. They are they do nothing with the post-apocalypse is just it's just like window dressing for an utterly generic and empty Hollywood formulaic story, right? Like,
right. And with Waterworld, that's what I think. Like, I still think it's just like a bunch of guys getting together and pitching an idea that's just water, and then any question that comes up, it's like nobody's gonna care, man. Yeah. It's gonna look amazing. It's a water world. That's like the whole justification for it. The Postman movie, it is remarkable that they did. I mean,
it's based on a novel from I think the 80s, right?
And they just cut out all the backstory and like also like all of the actual. Like,
I don't think the author was very happy with the movie. Although I don't think the movie. I doubt the novel's like that good either. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it would be hard to imagine that it was like an exceptional piece of work given what.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, like there is something there, right? The idea of this shutdown,
like institutions being the center of American life.
Well, and like quickly formed dark age that if you want more sick and break out of just the like weird insistence on the return of American hegemony, right? It's this idea of like information sharing and communication, which is, you know, one small jump from trade and you know the building back of, you know, getting out of a dark age.
Well, and like the internet, right? Like the idea of connect.
You could see a novel. You could see a novel where
being so important to the 90s,
where like a character.
What if we didn't even have? Forget email. We don't even have the post office.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, I think what's funny about this is like if I was trying to make an Oscar worthy movie, like Costner was so clearly trying to do, it's like. I think lowering the stakes really would have helped this movie. If like,
or also just like why, like have it set in a world that makes any sense at all.
Well,
like,
sure, but I mean that aside, it's like the act of deciding you're gonna like realizing how important it is for people to get information, then starting to take risks and build a group to do that. Sounds like it could kind of be an interesting movie, but as so often is the case with these movies that we talk about and others. It gets lost in this American framework that it cannot escape from, such that like the act of the Postal Service is way actually less important than the American value that it suggests.
Yeah.
Right. And that literally like what makes them happier and makes them more confident and the ability to make something of their lives again is that a fictitious American government has been reformed.
Yeah.
Like before that, why would we even conceive of any other way of operating other than to sit here while the tyrant chops our heads off?
Yeah.
But now that we know that back in Washington, D.C.
or in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, right. That's where now, you know what? Now it's time to take some risks. It's like, it's so absurd how often these productions lean on this stuff.
Yeah. All right, we're about out of time. I don't really have anything more to add. I think you've kind of put a pretty like fine.
Yeah, I don't even really feel like Postman's like a sci-fi.
No.
You know, like I just don't. It's like it's just
a post-apocalyptic Western. There's no sci-fi features really. I mean, aside from the like line he rides on with Tom Petty, like no, literally,
because they're not reckoning with the apocalypse. They're reckoning with an army that has taken over.
Yeah. It's bad. So next week, what are we talking about? Do you remember? I will inform you.
I don't remember.
We're taking our first dip into classic literature, and it's a little bit of an unconventional choice, but I'll justify and explain in due time. We're looking at Mary Shelley's 1818 novel Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus, and we're really focusing in on the novel because I think, you know, there are some apocalyptic themes within it. And maybe we'll spend a little bit of time talking about its history as a film, but I want to keep the focus on the book for this one. It's going to be great. Awesome. That was really fun, even though those movies were really bad. Remember to subscribe and share the pod with anyone you think might be interested in what we've got going on.
Follow us on Instagram at the End of the World WMS.
And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
This is the End of the World with Michael and Stu. I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu. Goodbye.